of 333 BC in the narrow coastal plain near the town of Issus in southern Cilicia, modern-day Turkey, one of the most consequential battles in antiquity was fought. The Battle of Issus. Atop his horse, Alexander of Macedon rode across his battle line. He was inspiring his men for the fight to come.
Macedonians, companions in glory, today we stand not as mere men, but as heirs of Achilles, of Heracles, sons of those who broke the tyranny of the East in ages past. Before us lies the Persian horde, vast in number, rich in gold, but soft with luxury and spoiled by their own excess. Dare they call themselves warriors when they fight for pay and pleasure? We fight for glory, for our homelands, for the eternal memory of our deeds. Behind us lies all we know, our families, our heritage. Before us lies immortality. You have marched with me from Pella to the edge of the world. You have crossed mountains and rivers, endured heat and hardship, and you have never broken. At Granicus you saw their champions fall beneath your spears. At every turn you have proven that courage and discipline, not gold or numbers, determine victory. Let them come with their chariots, their archers, and their endless ranks. Let them look upon you, the sons of Macedon of Greece, and no fear. Today we write history. Today we show Darius that this land is not his, but ours by right of might. Follow me, and let the world remember what happened here at Issus, for victory and for glory.
The Macedonian army was approximately 35,000 to 40,000 men in strength. Alexander himself commanded the Macedon right flank. He was accompanied by contingents of his elite companion heavy cavalry. Among others, his companions were supported by Agranian infantry, Thracian infantry, skirmishers such as peltasts and slingers. This section of his force was well trained, extremely versatile, mobile and highly disciplined, with a strong command structure. This section of Alexander's force was the key to his successes in battle and throughout all of his campaigns. It acted as the hammer in his classic hammer and anvil strategy against his enemies in battle. Alexander's most trusted and competent commander, Parmenion, had the honors of commanding the Macedon left flank. This flank was equally as important as the right, as it acted as a counterweight to absorb charges and tie down large chunks of the enemy army. Parmenion's force consisted entirely of swift-moving cavalry, primarily Thessalian cavalry. The Macedon center was where the real grit of the army lay. Made up entirely of a mixture of different infantry, all with a specific purpose during the heat of the battle. 9,000 phalangite Sarissa pikemen made up the iron core of the army. These men were the key to Alexander's numerous victories. 3,000 hypaspists infantry on both ends of the center. 7,000 allied Greek hoplites in support, with an additional 5,000 mercenary hoplites, and 8,000 light Thracian and Illyrian infantry in support. Before the battle would commence, Alexander, a genius tactician, quickly noticed that his left flank was outmatched. He sent a contingent of his companion cavalry to his left flank to aid Parmenion's Thessalian contingents against the opposing Persian right flank, which vastly outnumbered Parmenion's left and had heavier cavalry. This was a decisive move by Alexander, as if his left flank had collapsed, the battle would have been surely lost. Opposing Alexander and the Macedonians was the great and powerful Achaemenid Empire, or more commonly known as the Persian Empire. At their center was a mixture of infantry from across their vast borders, primarily light infantry from Armenia, Mesopotamia, Bactria, and even heavy Greek infantry, who joined King Darius's ranks as well-paid mercenaries. Among the most renowned were the Persian Immortal Infantry, heavily armored and well-trained in combat. These men were the most elite soldiers in the entire Persian army. King Darius III, atop his warhorse, or perhaps chariot, some accounts differ, was stationed at the center among his vast sea of infantry. The Persian left, positioned directly across from Alexander's flank, was made up of archers at the front, with light and heavy infantry behind in support. Overall, the Persian army, from more realistic sources, was estimated at 50 to 100,000 men. The Persian right fielded almost the entirety of Darius's cavalry force, made up of a mixture of skirmisher cavalry, light cavalry, and heavy cavalry from Bactria, Parthia, and as far as Scythia. This was for sure the stronger of the two Persian flanks, and had a noticeable numerical advantage compared to the Macedon left, led by Parmenion and his Thessalians directly opposite. The signal was given. Battle would commence. Despite his army's fatigue from marching relentlessly towards the city of Issus in pursuit of the Persians, Alexander chose to engage Darius immediately, recognizing the opportunity the constrained battlefield presented. The battlefield was a narrow coastal plain bounded by the Gulf of Issus to the west and the Amanus Mountains to the east, with the Pinarus River running across it. This terrain nullified Darius's numerical superiority by limiting the effective deployment of his forces. The full might of the Macedon army advanced in lockstep. The sound of metal clanging and thunderous footsteps deafened the battlefield for miles. Alexander's men were confident and had high morale due to their sheer belief in their young commander, who had already secured multiple decisive victories over the Persian armies in prior battles, primarily at the Battle of the Granicus a year prior. The battle opened up with Persian archers at the forefront swarming forward into firing range of their composite bows. They began loosing thousands of arrows into the oncoming Macedonian ranks. The Macedon cavalry and Sarissa pikemen were extremely vulnerable to the projectiles, and casualties ensued. As the battle commenced, Alexander personally led his companion cavalry on the right, charging across the plain and striking at the Persian left. Despite heavy missile fire and difficult terrain, the Macedonians pressed forward with discipline. The companion cavalry swept through the Persian archers with ease and smashed into the line of infantry, causing sheer chaos. On the opposite flank, Parmenion and his Thessalian cavalry contingents prepared to engage a much larger force of Persian cavalry, with their only objective being to hold firm as long as possible. The decisive clash at the center was about to unfold, where each force fielded the bulk of their armies. Tens of thousands of light and heavy infantry arrayed into formation and fearlessly marched toward each other, neither backing down. The Macedon phalangites pointed their long Sarissa spears forward, prepared to deal devastation. The Persian infantry, confident in their numbers and the presence of their king, charged forward looking to swiftly break the Macedon center. The Persians had initial success with their overwhelming infantry numbers. They not only brought the Macedon center to a halt, but began to slowly force them to give ground, particularly on the ends of their lines where the allied Greek hoplites and hypaspists were stationed. Alexander was well aware that he could not rely on his left flank to hold out for too long against the superior numbers of the Persian heavy cavalry. He also knew that his center, although reliable and able to hold its own, would eventually fall apart if the Persian cavalry overwhelmed Parmenions' left, then turned their attention inwards to attack his engaged infantry from the flank and rear. Just as the tide shifted in favor of King Darius and the Persian force, seemingly having the battle in their grasp, the Persian left, the weaker section of Darius's army, was outwitted by Alexander and his companion cavalry. Now was the moment. Alexander acted swiftly, using his versatile strike force of cavalry and skirmishers to successfully rout the Persian left. His men gave pursuit, chasing the remainder of the Persian left far away from the battlefield. With Darius's left broken, the tide of the battle slowly began to shift. However, time was of the essence as the Macedon left. Parmenions' contingent was also on the verge of breaking. Alexander shifted gears and propelled into action. He prepared a decisive attack on the Persian center's exposed rear. He led the charge himself with his ever-reliable strike force of cavalry and skirmishers. They rode relentlessly, charging straight into the rear of Darius's center. The Macedon countercharge was highly effective, smashing into the ranks of Persian infantry and causing panic and confusion. The Persian troops, completely unaware that their grasp on victory could be achieved if they had held firm and fought on for just a while longer, were utterly overcome by sheer fear from the heavy blow that Alexander's companion cavalry had caused with their rear charge. To make matters worse, the rest of Alexander's infantry had arrived from his right, encircling many of the Persian troops at the center. Seeing his flanks disintegrate and fearing encirclement, King Darius fled the battlefield, abandoning the remainder of his troops to fight on leaderless. The flight of their king caused panic. The Persian army, now leaderless and disorganized, broke into a chaotic retreat. Thousands were killed or captured. Macedonian losses were relatively light. Estimates suggest a few hundred killed, with a large amount being wounded. Persian casualties were far greater. Tens of thousands were likely killed or wounded during their retreat. The Battle of Issus was not merely a tactical victory. It was a pivotal moment in ancient history. It established Alexander as a force that could not be stopped, even by the mightiest empire of the known world. The triumph at Issus laid the groundwork for the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire and the rise of the Hellenistic era, during which Greek culture spread across Asia, influencing lands from Egypt to India. Later historians, such as Arrian, Diodorus, Curtius Rufus, and Plutarch, recorded detailed accounts of the battle, drawing from contemporary sources like Ptolemy and Callisthenes. The source we used here to recreate this battle was from Arrian, as we believe it best describes Alexander's style of tactics and strategy.